Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 112.
Honest citizens like you protect themselves every day. We talk about it every week on the Self Defense Gun Stories podcast. Were these gun owners lucky, or did they have a plan? How should we defend the people we love? We discuss recent examples on the Self Defense Gun Stories podcast. Put us in your pocket.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 112 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/112. This week's sponsors are ScottShot, ScottShot.com. Whether you are taking a class as a complete beginner or an experienced, highly competent shooter seeking NRA or USCCA instructor certification, ScottShot classes are comfortable, friendly, and taught with a high instructor-to-student ratio. So head over to ScottShot.com and check them out. And also by Self Defense Gun Stories podcast, weekly reports and commentary on civilian self-defense. Rob Morse and several different firearms trainers have been on the show as his guests, analyzing over 400 different civilian uses of self-defense. So very informative, very useful, and in fact we're going to be interviewing Rob Morse today. So now, here's Rob. Rob Morse, welcome to the show.
Great to join you, James.
So, Rob, you run the Slowflax blog, and I think you have over 500 articles out there. Is that right?
I have 1,500 articles on my blog.
Wow, excellent. Amazing.
I've been at it for a while.
Okay. So, I was going through yesterday. I saw you had an article up there about that college that decided to distribute hockey pucks as a self-defense tool.
Yes. Yes. I actually wrote about them twice. The first time I wrote about them, you had to make fun of them, but I wasn't alone. So many people made fun of them. I think our culture has changed. We think back 10 years ago, some group of academics say, yeah, we're going to defend our campus. We've issued, rocks to everybody. Yep, that wouldn't have been a newspaper article. Now everybody's going, what the heck?
Yeah, and it's I'm glad. And on the one hand, I'm looking at it like, if I was looking at this from an improvised weapons standpoint, that's not bad. And at the same time, they're in a position where they can allow their entire student body to defend themselves with the best tool available, and their answer is no. Let's scale it back and give you guys, these primitive weapons.
Well, I think what they saw, academics hate to invent. They evolve slowly. There was a school district in Pennsylvania who issued 5-gallon pails full of pretty heavy river rocks to each classroom. Oh, that's like violent. That could hurt somebody. Let's use a hockey puck instead. Also, in ALICE training, it's a common demonstration to get the class, they'll put an airsoft mask on them, and somebody comes in with an airsoft gun. Unopposed, they get shot. But if you issue the class tennis balls, it's hard to shoot somebody when you're getting pummeled with tennis balls. Okay, great training aid, crappy plan.
Right. Yeah. It goes back to the whole improvised thing. If you didn't plan and you don't have a firearm, that's a great improvised alternative. But if you have the opportunity to plan for somebody in the room to have a firearm.
You and I've heard this any number of times. Planning to improvise isn't a plan.
Right. Yep. And it also kind of relates to something Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, what else just makes this infinitely crazy is for the person who goes, no, in schools that's appropriate. Really? Really? So if a celebrity comes to school, they should be guarded with a hockey puck. If a celebrity comes to town at a large venue, they should be guarded with hockey pucks. If a criminal is escorted from one courthouse to a jail to another holding facility, they should be guarded with hockey pucks. We wouldn't accept this silliness in any other context except in our schools where we want to protect our children. Wow.
Yeah, and it really is. You can almost understand them being anti-gun, but then when you present them with, that there's that one line, this is the most valuable thing we have.
Right.
Why don't you want to defend it with a firearm? But they still hold on to that, and so it's sort of a mystery as to.
Well, I may be digging us deeper into this subject than you intend, but I don't think it's a mystery. These are people who build academic models in their head. They're better at it than anybody else. But you and I, with just a casual acquaintance of firearms, that's real world experience. And you go, so you guys think you can hide a class in a corner and I get to come through the door and you're going to hit me with a hockey puck before I shoot a large number of people? Did anybody explain to you that a firearm is a distance tool? I get to literally stand outside the classroom and kill people. It's like, let's just put it this way. You or I would say, you know what? Let's test this. Let's get some tennis balls and airsoft and see how it works.
Yeah. Yep.
And the academic goes, no, it looks like a good model. Let's go with it.
And and two is there's no number of hockey pucks that you can have, right? No matter how many times you hit him with that hockey puck, he's going to survive, presumably. But he only has to shoot back once, and so the
scales are tilted strongly against us.
Yes. So, speaking of places where you can only have improvised weapons, New Jersey lost its appeal in the Third Circuit last night, or yesterday. And you had an article about gun control failing in New Jersey. Someone was shot 20 times, broad daylight, and no one was around that could defend her.
Yes. This looks like a gangland assault. Two thugs driving down the street saw somebody they wanted to kill. It was a 19-year-old woman. They stop the car in the middle of the street, chase her down the block, across the street. She ducks, I think, into a Walgreens. And they catch her, shoot her 20 times. It's caught on video. Broad daylight in Trenton, New Jersey. That's the state capital. This isn't some, small burb, abandoned road nuzzled against Pennsylvania. This is in the state capital. Now, one horrific event isn't statistically significant, but Trenton is the 34th most violent crime in the United States, most violent city in the United States, and that's not even the most violent city in New Jersey. Camden is more violent, and I think they come in number 4 in the nation.
Yep.
So when you look at all the gun control laws in New Jersey, they were all sold to us that if we restrict honest people, then criminals won't have guns. Well, man, did that not turn out? I mean, 7-day waiting periods. How long can it take to get a firearms permit to even buy a pistol? Half a year?
30 days. Yeah.
Well, no, the law is 30 days,
right.
But what does it take?
Right. Yeah, depending on the city, can take up to 6 months. I think Jersey City and Bayonne have the record right now for the longest wait.
A dubious record to hold. So, yes. And okay, that means you could defend yourself at home. Perhaps you could defend yourself at your business, but you're disarmed in between. as this young woman was as she walked down the street.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've been to Trenton for, public safety committee meeting hearings when they propose new gun control laws, and the police presence is amazing. Like it's almost frightening to see how many police officers there are, and it's a small city, so it's not, it's not like they have a lot of ground to cover. But yeah, it's to think that there can be that many law enforcement people there, and someone's still able to get away with that is kind of highlights the point that you can't. The cops are minutes away. Yeah,
and unless you have a policeman every 100 yards, he's not there when the crime is committed, because criminals will wait until they have an opportunity. And Trenton is 2.5 times more dangerous than the U.S. average. Yeah, so what they're doing isn't working. And the article was called "Gun Control Fails New Jersey." It's on my slowfacts.wordpress blog. Wow. I mean, it works for New Jersey politicians and judges. They get their permits, but the honest citizens who are on the street don't, and it's getting us killed.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm very anxious to see how this plays out in the Supreme Court. And, we know the cases are going there. We have 2 that are on the way, and I'm very curious to see how this goes. In this mag ban case too, is the gun control folks like to roll their eyes and complain when we talk about the slippery slope. But New Jersey started with a 15-round magazine limit, and they, now we're, they kind of set the ball rolling. Other states went to 10. New York went to, I think, 7. New Jersey proposed a bill for 5, and that didn't go anywhere. But now New Jersey passed a bill limiting magazine capacity to 10, and this Third Circuit upheld it. So,
well, now I have to correct you there, James.
Okay.
That limitation doesn't apply to law enforcement.
Oh, okay.
It's not a ban. It's not a prohibition. It's selective. You can't have a firearm that has a magazine capacity greater than 10 rounds. The police can. The people guarding the politicians and judges can, but not you. So you're facing 2 criminals. If my wife is trying to protect herself, I'm thinking a magazine capacity just smaller than a dump truck looks about right to me.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that the bad guys never get a chance to come close to her. I'm biased. I admit it. It is the issue with the Supreme Court, even if we think we have the votes on the court for judges that might consider this case in a favorable light, the Supreme Court takes less than 1% of the cases that are appealed to it. Those are bad odds.
Yeah. Yeah. So we know we've had 5 or 6 cases get almost there, probably more than that, get almost there and not be heard. And
right.
And there's the issue that they've already ruled. I mean, I think it's very clear in Heller and McDonald that concealed carry is protected by the Second Amendment. It's just, the other side doesn't want to admit that. And surely the magazine ban, would be protected, but the other side doesn't want to hear that. So
it's arguable from Heller, because they said time and place restrictions, unusual weapons, the magazine capacity. The thing to me that makes it so clear is that New Jersey deliberately created exemptions to this law. Oh, they're not really bad. They're just bad if you do it. And the clear evidence is that the criminals aren't listening.
Yeah, exactly. The criminals aren't listening, and they have a unlimited supply of high capacity magazines. As easy as they are to manufacture, they, if they can't buy them somewhere, they can always make them. And that.
I don't know if you want to get into this. Maybe you'll delete this out. There is a delicate balance, because guns save lives. We forget that. I mean, I'm sure that New Jersey's laws inconvenienced some criminal somewhere to some small degree, but they inconvenienced every honest gun owner. They disarmed the intended victims. They made crime easier rather than make it harder. They put us at greater risk rather than making us safer. You can pass lots of laws that inconvenience criminals. We could eliminate cars. Well, but that also inconveniences the good guys to an even greater degree.
Right. And that's always the thing. Is murder is illegal and punishable by, life in prison or death. But if that does not dissuade someone from carrying a gun illegally, presumably to commit murder, then what lesser law is going to be more persuasive? And
I think what's more persuasive are campaign contributions. Sadly.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Even for laws, isn't that sad? Even for laws that we know don't work, politicians are in it for the money. That's heartbreaking, really.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been listening to Self Defense Gun Stories, your podcast. And
oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was shocked by how many people. I wasn't sure if I was more shocked by how many people didn't have their firearm on them at all times, but how many people started from that situation and were able to present and use their firearm and survived. Particularly, like there was a few that someone had a gun pointed on them, and they were able to either draw their firearm or retrieve their firearm and and use it defensively. And that was a scenario that in my training I had come to believe just wouldn't be survivable. So, any thoughts on that?
Sure. Let's take it piece at a time. There is an existing myth that if you're a shopkeeper, you keep your firearm stored near the cash register because that's what they want to rob. Well, stop and think about that. For large periods during the day, you're not behind the cash register. If it's a sole proprietorship, you're restocking things, you're dealing with customers in the middle of your store, you're away from your gun. Your gun is probably exposed if some 5-year-old, gets out of mom's hands, walks behind the counter. Oops, we would never treat a firearm that way at home. The thought that a bad guy won't put a gun to your head while you're in the middle of your store, you are what we want to protect, not the cash register. So I think this is a carryover. Shopkeepers are learning. They'll come around. The issue of action versus reaction, of a stationary target versus someone who moves. The story that I talked about that brought this so clearly to mind was, I believe, a Chinese food restaurant was being robbed. There are two clerks there. One hands him the drawer. The other clerk is armed. And as the robber looks at the cash drawer, looks at that person, the other clerk has forever to draw and shoot and end the threat. You could let's you do it. If it's 2-on-1, I may not even be armed. You don't know which one of us is armed. I'm handing you everything you've asked for. Where's your attention?
On you. Yep.
On me.
Yeah.
It was interesting to take a couple defensive classes. You and your wife, you and your girlfriend, your husband, you're walking down the street, somebody accosts you, you take 2 steps. The instinct is, let me hide behind you. The proper reaction is take 2 steps apart. You don't look like the last guy this robber successfully robbed, and all of a sudden his attention has to be 2 places at once.
Yeah, that is interesting, because in my training too, they talked about that. Yeah, have someone stand behind you, and when they talk about like children, have them hold your belt. But yeah, as adults, that makes a lot of sense. Take 2 steps and fight them.
It splits concentration. What it also lets one person do, if you're carrying on the right side and you step with part of your right side hidden by your partner ahead of you, you now have all day to draw. and the criminal never sees it. So reality is more complicated than Hollywood would let us believe.
Absolutely. So what are some, I mean, you've analyzed, I guess, close to 300, 350 self-defense stories are there?
Coming up on 450, 500, something like that. Halfway through, our listeners said, hey, you only do 3 stories a week. It takes 15 minutes for us to listen. Let's bump it up. Give me 18 to 22 minutes of self-defense gun stories. So now we're doing 4 an episode.
What are some of the key, are there patterns that emerge that you've?
Luck goes both ways. I bring us the stories where self-defense was successful. Just because we were successful doesn't mean we did everything right. And we can enormously improve our odds if we think ahead. You and I, as avid shooters, whether it's for sport or self-defense, we might practice hard to make our draw just a little faster. But compare that to the 10 seconds when we're sitting there with a blank look on our face going, what's happening? Am I being robbed? So it's that it's not how fast your hands are. It's how fast your brain catches up with what's going on. So that's the real advantage, I think, of these stories. People learn vicariously through other people's experience. They go, this happens. Hey, I was going to go sell a motorcycle tonight. I should probably bring a friend because I read about a couple stories where a Craigslist sale was really an invitation to a robbery. Let's do it in front of the police department. So we learn from others. On top of that, the public doesn't know that self-defense happens. So these stories help explain it to the general public that people just like them successfully defend themselves every day.
Yeah. And that's something I think I'm really glad that you do these, because we hear all the time about the 2.8 million defensive uses of firearms every year, but we only get reported the instances of the bad guy succeeding. We never hear about the good guy succeeding. And
right. The good guy succeeding goes on the below the fold on the back of the sports section.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And or it makes the front page in the town, but never makes it to the national news.
Right.
And gets mentioned one time. Yeah. Whereas the woman who successfully defended herself against the hippopotamus by punching it in the face this morning, I've heard about that nonstop.
Well, that is the nature of the news. What else should we talk about?
Well, you went to Spain recently, and did you have a chance to talk to gun people over there?
I did. I was very fortunate to have met a man who's very active in protecting the rights of gun owners in Spain, affiliated with people in Europe who are doing the same. He came to the NRA convention. A friend set us up. We got to meet. I got to meet him. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't even touch a firearm. It would take 6 months, and being a foreigner, I don't know that I could obtain a permit. But if, for example, you wanted your son to shoot your gun, in theory, it takes 6 months for him to get a permit so that he can even touch it. Spain is very socialist. They have no rights of self-defense. Let me explain how different this is by giving, I'll sort of highlight it. In the United States, if it's not against the law, you can do it. In Spain, with a gun, you can only do what is permitted. So the police qualifying exam doesn't have the police shooting any closer, I believe, than 25 yards at a target. Shooting at 25 yards from a stationary position is permitted. Law enforcement, since that's not in the police qualifications, civilians can't do it either. It's not permitted to shoot at a closer distance. So we went by a an unused range where the special forces train in Spain, regional special forces, and there's a cop shooting up close, but he sees us, he looks around, holsters his gun. The police have to sneak in the training that they know they need. Civilians can only do it if it's part of like a Steel Challenge or IDPA or USPSA, and then they need specific police permission to do it on that site on that day. It's crazy. It's shooting has become a rich man's sport. It's being ground out of their culture. On the other hand, given the degree to which firearms are restricted, the gun owners, they chat, they have internet connections, they talk on bulletin boards, on Facebook groups, on their own websites. Guy goes, yeah, I found an AK near the beach. The Muslim smugglers must have dropped one. There are no-go cities in south of Spain on the Mediterranean. Wow. Yeah. So it reminds you of New Jersey, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it does. And it's very, very similar, like the 6 months part. But I'm glad to hear, because one thing that the left likes to put out there is that only Americans care about guns, and not outside the U.S. There's nobody. But I was able to find a couple of guys in Canada that I've been able to talk to, and one guy from Australia, and I'm working on finding guys in other countries. I know they're out there, and like you said, he's active in having those rights restored, and yeah, that's great.
I'll share my contacts with you. Let me bring up one more thing. When I was there, the day I was traveling was the day of the attack on the bar in California. Many people were killed. Gun-free zone. 6 police officers in the bar, all of them disarmed, because even if they're not involved, if they're in the bar, something happens, they're going to get a breathalyzer test. If it's not 3 zeros and they've got their gun, they're done. They're going to get fired. So the socialists, the gun owners in Spain are beaten up by our shooting events. Oh, aren't you glad we have all these restrictions on you in Spain so that this doesn't happen here? They don't talk about the massacres down in the no-go zones with the smugglers. What's for a Spanish producer that will take self-defense gun, take my stories, you need your own host and instructor. I want somebody to redo it in Spanish, because they're only getting half
I'm
the
sorry,
story.
I lost you between smugglers and there was like a big gap in there.
I'm sorry.
That's right. So they don't talk about the massacres. Was the last thing we heard.
The Spanish media ignores the gross criminal violence that happened in the no-go zones. But what the Spanish media does do is beat up on Spanish gun owners anytime there's a shooting in the United States, like the one in that bar in California. The Spanish media would never, ever cover all the self-defense cases that we see here. I'm looking for a producer, a Spanish bilingual producer, to take self-defense gun stories and come out with a Spanish-speaking edition, not only for the people in Spain, but for the immigrants here who don't understand our culture of self-defense, our right of self-defense, our duty to protect ourselves here in the United States.
And are you looking for, I guess it would have to be someone to translate the episodes that you have?
Well, once we find the right person, where they want to start is entirely up to them. Okay. Let's start with the next episode and go forward. It doesn't matter. Those are mere details. But you and I can't find the words grip, stance, sight alignment, prohibition. Those don't translate well through Google Translate. I really need a native speaking Spanish person, and preferably one who understands those cultures where self-defense isn't recognized.
Well, I think just about out of time. Thanks so much for being on the show again. And I'll link to Slowflax blogs and self-defense gun stories. Any other links I should throw up on the show notes page?
No, but I will mention to your listeners, my articles appear in AmmoLand and at Clash Daily. I'm also on the co-host on the Polite Society podcast. That's Paul Lathrop's ensemble program.
Rob, I thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's my pleasure, James. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 112. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/112. Head over there. You'll find links to our sponsors, scottshot.com and Self Defense Gun Stories Podcast. This is Out of Order James Kalita. Thanks for listening.